Welcome to Unraveling the Secrets, where we explore the connecting links between the pernicious deeds of a group of secret society outlaws who are creating a tightly controlled world society with them as bosses and you and I as slaves to their system, popularly known as the New World Order. Research indicates that most of the unexplained craft we see in our skies are from somewhere on or inside our planet. This led to research of the Hollow Earth and subterranean theories in the 1980s and 90s, which in turn led to the realization that the answers we seek are in the control of a number of elitist groups and secret societies that we call collectively the Controllers. Even a quick look at recent world events should convince anyone that the Controllers' plan is working very well. It is these things we explore on this radio show. Join us as we work towards unraveling the secrets.
Hey, it's Saturday night, and this is Timothy Green Beckley, otherwise known as Tim Beckley, Mr. UFO, and along with Carla Anderson over there in Jersey City, and our friendly engineer and producer, the Jacko Angel down in Miami, we welcome you to another exciting episode of Unraveling the Secrets.
Welcome.
And you know, I'm a little bit hungry tonight. In fact, I think it's time to dine with the gods. Our special first.
I'm in the mood for pancakes myself. I don't know about you guys.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Alien pancakes. They're my favorite. Anyway, we're welcoming to the air Joshua Cutchin. And some people might say that Joshua has a reputation for being a bit of a blowhard. Well, actually, he started playing the tuba at age 12. And just 5 years later, he appeared on NBC's Today Show. But outside of music, which I guess is his career, we'll find out, he's also interested in what we term Fortean phenomena. And he's just written a very courageous, very timely, and very unusual book. In fact, it may be one of the most unusual books in the paranormal. It's called A Trojan Feast, and it's just been released by Anomalous Books. I think it's only been out maybe about a week or 10 days. Joshua, welcome to the show.
Hi, Tim. How you doing there?
How are you? You're down in Georgia, are you?
Yes, I am. I'm in Georgia. Yeah.
Well, good to have you on. I know actually the book is getting quite a bit of attention, I guess you would say. It's gotten some positive reviews. I know we were on the air a couple of weeks ago with Nick Redford and Peter Robbins, and we were talking about the case from Eagle River, Wisconsin, Joe Hamilton, and the alien pancake. And he said, well, geez, you know, you've really got to get a hold of this book, The Trojan Feast by Joshua Cutchin.
It's a great book. It is a great book. Not to pat myself in the back, but it is a good book.
Well, what made, how long have you been investigating this? Like what led up to this? I mean, most people are interested in maybe, the landing aspects or the abductions and some of the strange things that go on. But what led up to this? I mean, why did you decide to do research into this particular aspect?
I was really bored, Tim. I was at home and I had nothing to do for a weekend, and I started writing. Next thing you know, the book's done.
Yeah, but there must have been something. What was the case that drew this to your attention?
It had to do with paranormal activity, Tim. It was all over the place.
Had you had your own experiences?
Yes.
What had happened to you? What sort of experiences did you have?
One time, I was at band camp.
This guy sucks, Tim.
Excuse me, young lady. Tim, I can't continue. Goodbye.
What is the story here? Well, there we go. Looks like
it looks like I've driven another guest off the air.
Well,
Carla, what are you doing?
What are you doing?
What are we doing?
Well, we're going to be talking to Smiles Lewis, I think.
No, Tim. Should we tell him, Carla? I think Carla knows what happened.
Don't tell him yet.
No?
No, maybe you could get Joshua back on the line.
Let's try to get him back on the line. Yeah, that's a good idea.
Hang on, Tim. No offense, Tim, but...
Wow, can't believe that just happened.
But I think that man was an imposter.
I don't know what was going on there, Tim.
You think he was an imposter?
We think so. Let's see if we can get Joshua back on the line.
Yeah.
Hello?
Oh my God, Joshua?
Joshua?
Yes. Hello.
Is this the real Joshua? Because
this is the real Joshua. I was listening online and I was freaking out. I was like, "What the hell is going on?
What was going on?"
Oh my. Yeah, this is the real Joshua Cutchin. All other
pretenders,
please
see,
step aside.
I can tell from here. I'm psychic.
Well, you're very perceptive.
I thought I was the only one that picked up on how fake that sounded. Carla, I'm so glad that I wasn't the only one. I was going crazy.
Well, I thought we might be having a little problem with a guest, but I don't usually go after the jugular in the first 5 minutes.
hopefully I'm not that problematic. Jeez.
Wow.
So don't try anything, Joshua.
Well, you know, that's...
So how do we know this is the real Joshua, though? Because we've been fooled once.
How do you make alien pancakes?
I could go get my tuba. That might work.
There you go. Can you blow hard? Yeah, go ahead.
In fact, it sounded like you were talking through your tuba there for a few minutes.
Right,
in all seriousness, what was that? Do we know? Was it just a...
He said something about band camp. I don't know, and you play a tuba, so...
Yeah, fair enough. Yeah.
Well, there you go. Now, everybody is being hacked these days. I guess we can actually say that Unraveling the Secrets has been hacked.
We were hacked.
I consider it a form of flattery.
Well, there you go. Anyway,
in 7 years of doing radio, I've never had that happen to me before. That's amazing.
Well, I guess with Skype, you can kind of sneak in.
Yeah, I mean, I guess so. I've been
especially when you're the producer.
Yeah, well, fair enough.
That's some crazy stuff. Anyway, continue with your guest here, Tim.
Yes,
crazy.
All right. We've had our laugh for the evening. Now we should have our real laugh for the evening. Okay, Joshua. Let's go back to question 1. How did you decide, or what made you decide to write A Trojan Feast?
Well, for me, there's been this giant bullseye on this aspect of the phenomena that no one has really talked about for a while. And I've always been really interested in fairy folklore and how if you ate food from a fairy, you would be trapped in the fairy realm. And I had a real light bulb moment. I can even remember the exact moment. I was reading J. Robert Alley's Raincoast Sasquatch, which is a great book. And in the book, he actually mentions how some First Nations tribes in Alaska say that if you take food from a bookwus, which is their version of Sasquatch, that you're actually doomed to remain with the Sasquatch forever. So at that moment, I decided to stop waiting for someone to write the book and go ahead and write it myself. So I reached out to my good friend Micah Hanks, who I seem to feel a kindred spirit with, and I spoke with Micah, and he said, "This is a great idea. Nobody's ever done this. Go for it." And he pointed me in some directions and gave me some pointers, and a year later, I had the whole thing finished. So,
and you had no problem finding a publisher?
No, actually, I learned a long time ago that there's no real elevator pitch for this book. So I ended up getting some advice from Micah, and I've always been a big fan of what Patrick Weege has been doing over at Anomalous Books. Oh, yes. And I reached out to him, and he said, I don't know. It sounds sort of like a niche idea. He says, I'm not sure. It might be a little bit too specific. And he got a little bit into it and said, Josh, I love it. We're going to go with it. So.
You know, in this day and age of publishing, where publishing stands, you got to go with what you feel you want to do, not with what you feel is going to sell a lot of copies. Because first of all, as a publisher of over 200 books, you never really know what's going to sell. I mean, I've got titles on there that I've never once had the author on a radio or TV show because they've been dead for 30 or 40 years or longer, right. and the book sells. And yet I can get some other authors on every the show going, and the book won't sell 100 copies. It's totally amazing. And of course now the whole book market has changed. I mean, we used to have 4,000 bookstores on our mailing list. Now I don't know. There's a couple of hundred, and most of those are yoga centers, and even the few stores that used to specialize in this type of stuff. they're making their go at it by selling what we call sidelines. Gypsy cards and incense and crystals and some maybe nice Native American jewelry and things along that line. And the books are almost non-existent when you go into these stores anymore. But, it's a good thing. And you've gotten the respect of the community in very quick order and some very favorable reviews. And I know I haven't gotten the book yet, but I'm very excited about reading it. What would you say? Okay. Now we have how many cases altogether are in this Trojan Feast?
Well, first of all, if I can, right quick, be on the lookout for it because I did speak to Patrick, and you should be getting a copy soon.
Oh yes.
So my apologies for it not arriving sooner.
That's okay. I mean, it is what it is. Yeah.
It's sort of hard for me to put an exact number of the cases that I studied together because the areas of what you consider food sort of tend to get fuzzy at the edges. Sometimes you'll have people who just remember that they ate something in some of these anomalous encounters, or just remember that they drank something. Or sometimes you'll have there was one example of a lady in Ukraine who met a guy in a flying saucer and was given a pill that he dropped into her water that she had, a glass of water, and it fizzed and changed colors. And how do you qualify that? Is that earthly food with or is that alien food that's mixed with earthly food? So the rough number of cases that I surveyed is about 350.
Well, see, now you mentioning that case, which I had never heard of, reminds me of Orfeo Angelucci.
Yes,
yes. Or is that in the book? Because that's a very
absolutely, yeah. A lot of the directions that I go in the book make the case of Orfeo Angelucci actually quite important. But yeah, that is very reminiscent of Orfeo's case, and that's another one of those cases. Do you classify that as a pill or this nectar, or do you classify it as a liquid? I ended up sort of classifying it as a liquid because the books that he wrote are sort of like a love poem to this weird nectar.
Yeah, but there aren't. How about now? He had a little stripper gal or something appeared in the glass of water and danced around for him. Is that been reported before, or was that Orfeo's conjuration?
Well, I don't think it's tipping my hand too much to say that later chapters in the book sort of go into this idea of entheogens and this idea of what we would commonly call hallucinogens. Although I personally don't think they're as easily explained away as just being hallucinogens. But I think it does sort of tie into that. A lot of the imagery that he saw was somewhat akin to hallucinogenic imagery. And I know that Nick Redfern has been sort of toying with the idea that maybe he was slipped some LSD since he was, especially on the second time he took this nectar, he was around 29 Palms, California, where there's a lot of military personnel. So the things that he experienced are not all that dissimilar from some of the things that people have experienced. Now, I want to make it very clear that I'm not necessarily saying that the food that people receive is entheogenic, just that there might be a connection there.
Mm-hmm. Now, did you find that it was prevalent for a lot of these early contactees to break bread with their alien brothers, or is it more prevalent with the abduction stories?
Absolutely. Well, there are a couple of clear trends that really emerged. And one of the clear trends in the alien phenomena is that abductees tend to receive either liquids or pills, and they are almost always consumed under duress, sometimes force-fed. The liquids are usually either, in abduction accounts, very bitter or cloyingly sweet, one or the other. In contactee cases, you run into a lot of people receiving fruit juice and fruits and bread. There was a South African contactee, Elizabeth Clarer. I'm not sure if you're familiar with her. But,
in fact, she's in our, there's a chapter on her in our book that we just published, the UFO Repeaters, The Camera Doesn't Lie, because apparently she was an Adamski follower, and she claims actually to have married an extraterrestrial and had a child on some other planet.
Yes, her lover Akon, and he actually had a long conversation with her.
Like the musician Akon? Hold on.
AK
Like the guy who sings In Ghetto. Okay.
Maybe one and the same.
Okay.
But he put he actually went at some length describing to her how she should consume should consume salads and fruits because her earthly body was actually yearning for that sort of unique sustenance. So
that's funny. My doctor just recommended that this week.
You should check. Is your doctor from another planet?
I won't say. Possibly.
Perhaps, huh?
I think all doctors are from some other planet. If you ask me, I know. Yeah. Okay. Can you think of any other contactee? The contactees interest me much more than the abductees. To be honest with you, I don't know. Not that I necessarily believe them any more than I do the abductees, but I like their stories. At least they're positive. Where a lot of the abduction stories are certainly rather negative in tone.
Yeah, I do find the contactee stories very interesting, especially from the Greg Bishop standpoint of viewing them, maybe perhaps through the lens of an unidentified art movement or something. But there are a lot of these cases that I have run up against where I'm like, I don't necessarily believe this, but I'm just putting this out there in this book saying that this is what it is because no one had ever really compiled a list like this. So no. I try to use the word allegedly and purportedly as many times as I can. But one of those,
I stopped doing that years ago.
Well, yeah, I can see that.
Take it for what it's worth and make up your own mind. That's what I say about most of this.
Fair enough. Well, one of those gentlemen that I mentioned was a Mexico City contact from 1954, Armando Zuberon. Are you familiar with this gentleman? He was given. One of the things that people talk about in his particular encounter was he had this Martian shower where he had this waterless shower that was shot at him. But he was picked up and he was given some sort of. His hosts apparently said that they preferred some sort of milk to drink whenever they would sup. But he was given this breakfast that included like grilled meat and butter and cheese and fruit juice that tasted like mangoes and other fruits too. So
I can see they've come a long way. In those days, they wanted a glass of milk. Now they want the whole cow. I mean, come on, that just goes to show you. Was he the cab driver? Because there were a couple of Mexican contactees. Yeah, around the same time. Yeah, Scott Corrales wrote that up for us.
Yes. I actually.
My favorite story, of course, is the alien pancakes. The experience of Joe Symington, who lived in Eagle River, Wisconsin.
Yep.
Yes. In fact, we have a treat this evening. We have an audio that I think lasts for 3 or 4 minutes, where Joe tells his remarkable story. So maybe this is a good point to play it, and then we can come back and discuss that case for a few minutes, and then on to the next scrumptious little tidbit.
Sounds great.
All right. Well, we seem to be having a little technical problem with playing that audio. That goes back to I think 1975? Do you remember?
No, it was earlier than that. I believe it was 64, 61, 61, 61. Yeah. Quite early. Yeah.
It was a pretty interesting story, and it did get a little bit of attention. I mean, in the press in those days, it was a peculiar incident where this fellow Joe Symington, I guess, was out early one morning and. He saw the glittering, like dome of a craft there, and he was welcome on board the ship. And there were a couple of little men inside. I mean, I don't think they were tall in stature, but they were human-looking. And they invited him in and asked if he would like something to eat. And they produced, I think, 3 or 4 of these pancakes. Now, they were submitted for analysis. I believe he sent one to NICAP, the National Investigations Committee on Area Phenomena, which was a bad mistake on his part, certainly. And I remember the analysis that he got back made absolutely no sense. In fact, it didn't seem to have anything to do with a pancake at all. I don't know what they were trying to say, but obviously, Major Kehoe probably had too much syrup to eat one morning. Anyway, he wasn't prone to believe in any of the contactee stories. he felt that they were ridiculing the field, and would
Right.
try to prevent him. And he hated Adamski, of course, and he hated Jim Moseley. In fact, I don't know anybody that he liked. Come to think of it.
Well,
But,
it's that factor that I personally am quite invested in is this constant self mockery that these encounters tend to sort of engender. I find the weirder a story is, the more likely I personally am to believe it, because it's just a bizarre Mad Lib, the Simonton case. And if I have the case is sort of near and dear to my heart for another reason, because I did my undergraduate work at the University of Wisconsin, and
I noticed that. I was going to ask you about that. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and having had plenty of interactions with people of the Upper Midwest, there's some great people and some really down to earth people, and I can't think of a conceivable reason why a chicken farmer from Eagle River would want to bring so much ridicule upon himself. So, and he had the pancakes to prove it. So I don't know really what that.
And I got the audio to prove it, that there are actual pancakes.
Okay, well, then let us listen to this very brief audio of Joe Symington telling his own story in his own words, and this is a very rare archive. So
yes.
Let us listen.
Extremely. Here we go.
Where do you meet someone from outer space? Perhaps in the North Woods. Joe Symington of Eagle River, Wisconsin, spins a yarn about an April morning in 1961. A morning when, he says, he came face to face with another world.
Right here is where this flying saucer, this UFO landed. Right here about where I'm standing. And it was a big, huge thing, and I wondered what the heck it was. I was in my kitchen having a bite of lunch, and I turned around, put the dishes in the sink, and I looked out the window, and that's when I first saw this thing coming straight down, just like an elevator. And first I thought the roof went off of my house, and I thought, no, the roof is green and this is bright. What the heck is it? So I rushed out to see what it was, and by that time there was a hatchway opening up in the top of it, just like the trunk of your car. And then there stood a little man, I say a little man, about 5 foot tall, holding up a jug or a container, and he motioned, he wanted to drink. He motioned for water. So I walked up to him to get this jug, and I looked at his eyes, and they were so penetrating that I had to look away. So I went to the basement to get this water, and I thought, well, they want water, so I'll take it up to them and see what happens. And with that, I brought the water up, and he was looking at me when I first came out of the basement, but I didn't look at his face until I got right up to him. Then I looked up, and I handed the jug up with both hands, and I had that same look in his eyes, a sort of a penetrating look. And when he took the water, I balanced myself with this hand against the machine, and I stepped back a few steps. And then with that, he set the jug down, and he gave me a salute with the back of his hand, a gesture of thanks, I presume. And then, well, I gave him my salute. What am I going to do? So I noticed this little man, same size of a man, right to the right side of the hatchway, cooking these pancakes, which I have one here yet. He was frying these pancakes, and I pointed to him and made a gesture like eating. I thought maybe I'd get a conversation out of him. Nobody was saying anything, but he didn't say a word. He just reached over and he got a handful of them, 4 of them, and he handed them down to me. And they were hot and greasy. And this man cooking these pancakes, it was on a square grill-like concern. I couldn't see any flame, but it seemed to be very hot. There was smoke coming from it. And if that was their food, God help them, because I took a bite of one of them and it tasted like a piece of cardboard. And if that's what they lived on, no wonder they're small. And with that, he reached up and he closed this hatch with a heavy thud click like, and it latched. And you couldn't a bit more see where that hatch was, and you could see a hole in my hand. And with that, the thing started to raise, just like it came down. Everything was timed perfect. It went up about 20 feet, it tilted 45 degrees straight south and shot off. And within 2 or 3 seconds, it was out of sight. Well, there I stood in the driveway with a handful of greasy pancakes and my mouth open, wondering what the heck I'd saw, what had happened.
It is outside the realm of the Air Force to pass judgment on Mr. Simonton's case. However, the pancakes that he turned over to the Air Force were turned over to the Food and Drug people, and they were analyzed as pure buckwheat pancakes.
Go.
Well, there's the story of Joe Simonton right from the farmer's mouth. I wonder, Josh, if the pancake still exists, because Antonio Huneas had told me that it was in a display case in the cafeteria down at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, along with some other supposed UFO evidence. But then good old Joe claims that the pancakes were switched on him, I think, anyway. But the Air Force said that they were nothing but buckwheat pancakes. I don't know. They look pretty strange, and I don't think he would make that up. I mean, it's just like it's too crazy of a story to concoct it. I mean, you could say maybe aliens landed in my backyard and they came down the ramp and waved or something, but to say they gave you pancakes just seems a little
right
over the top.
No, I totally understand, and I one of my main interests in putting this book together was it should be obvious by now, was these little links that thread different phenomena together. And since you haven't had a chance to read the book yet, I'll go ahead and mention this little tidbit.
Yes.
In my research, I found these legends about these small elves in the Friesen Islands, which are off the coast of Denmark and Germany, and they are called the Unerbanski. And one of the things that they do is they bring fresh water and pancakes to farmers in the field. So I found that to be an interesting little parallel between that and what Simonton says he encountered, because water and pancakes were both, in play in that encounter.
Mm-hmm. Do we have to bring our own syrup, or do they provide that?
Well, according to Betty Andreasen, they bring their own syrup. She had a sort of syrupy liquid forced down her throat. So,
ooh,
that's kinky.
Yeah, it does.
And why did they ever explain why?
Not that I'm aware of. It's interesting. If you look at a lot of these encounters, a lot of them tend to bookend. The food rather tends to bookend the encounter. It either comes at the very beginning of an event or towards the end of an event. And I think that there's a clue there. But what's also apparent to me is that these people are in these situations for a relatively short amount of time. This isn't for sustenance. It's to administer some effect. I think that's pretty clear too. And now what that effect is still up for debate. But I think that the data tends to suggest that, you're not getting this drink just to keep you from being parched.
Now I have the ultimate mixed saucer experience. And this was an article that appeared in the Aerial Phenomena Research Organization's bulletin, the APRO bulletin, many, many years ago, of course, because the organization has been defunct probably for 3 decades, something like that. Anyway, there was a family. They were driving up in the Oregon mountains, and they were running short of gas, and it was getting a little I guess late in the day, and they weren't exactly sure where they were. So they actually needed some sort of assistance, and they were driving down one of the back mountain roads, and they saw a fast food restaurant of some kind, which, not surprising for us, was shaped somewhat like a flying saucer.
Yeah, I think this was in Crater Lake, Oregon, right? I think so.
I don't remember the town, but it's first we got Eagle River, and now we got Crater Lake.
I think we're thinking of the same. I think we're thinking of the same
yeah,
story.
Yeah,
go ahead.
I'm pretty sure. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So they run out of gas, but the car somehow seems to coast into the parking lot.
Mm-hmm.
And so they park and they get out and they go inside to, I guess, ask for directions or find out where they might call to get somebody to come with a can of gas. And they figure, well, they have some time, while this is going on, maybe to get a bite to eat. So now everybody inside the restaurant is dressed in kind of silver lame, very futuristic looking space type of outfits, and everybody is very polite. And there are, human looking people there waiting on them. And then there are some Roboton, to something right out of Star Wars or something, clicking and clacking and all. And the children, I think there were a couple of children, maybe early teenagers, and they were very, they were very excited about this, and they all enjoyed the food. Now, somehow I don't know as if they got instructions for the where to get the gas, but they got back into the car, and the car coasted out of the parking lot of the saucer-shaped fast food restaurant, and it turned over and it continued on its way and it got them to where they were going. Well, now everybody had such a good time at this futuristic restaurant. They wanted to return like a couple of weeks later and order another, saucer burger. And so they drove back to where they thought the restaurant was, but they couldn't find it.
Yeah, not only that, the locals didn't know of the restaurant at all, and they hadn't lost any money from the interaction either. So,
well, that is the story. But I think that would rate as my top incident of this type. Of course, we don't have the family to talk to, but if it were in the April Bulletin, I would say it's a good chance, that certainly the witnesses, the people involved existed. I don't think that they didn't obviously make it up from just make it up. It was obviously something that had been reported in to them. So I know there's a story that kind of goes along.
Did it have any effect on them?
Well, again, we had no way of contacting or interviewing the witnesses. I don't even think their names were necessarily given. No, I don't think so. They must have liked it. They liked it enough that they wanted to go back to the restaurant and order another bag of burgers.
Yeah, I mean, not that I'm aware of were there any real effects. I do know that Thomas Bullard, who wrote the foreword for the book, actually compiled this in his UFO abductions measure of a mystery compendium back in the 80s, which was at the time and still is a great touchstone for a lot of this information. But yeah, it was interesting. The mother's memory sharpened about a decade and a half later, and she was pretty sure at that point that they hadn't visited a restaurant. So I mean, the question is if they were able to make these people think that it was a restaurant. Either these people were so tired or there was some sort of screen memory, aspect in place. And the question is, if there was a screen memory in place, then what were they eating? And which opens up a whole can of worms about, can we take any of these things at face value? If someone says that they're being given an extraterrestrial pomegranate, are they really? Or is it something that is being cloaked in another way,
They might have been eating Snippy the horse.
Poor Snippy.
Yeah, that
horse is a horse, of course.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah.
Well, okay. Well, what would you consider the most famous cases where people have received food from aliens, from Sasquatch, and from fairies? And how does the food differ? I mean, do aliens have a different taste in food than Sasquatch or fairies?
Oh, definitely. I mean, I think we touched on the Simonton case, which is definitely the poster child for this sort of phenomena. If you don't think about manna from heaven being sort of being a variation on that as well, but that's far and away the most famous of the if you just want to lump abductees and contactees all in one barrel, that's the most famous of those encounters. The most famous Sasquatch encounter where someone received food was probably the Albert Ostman encounter, where a gentleman who in 1957 said he was picked up in his sleeping bag and dropped off with a Sasquatch family. And over the course of a couple of days, he gave them some quote-unquote sweet roots that had a satisfying taste.
Would I try to escape from their encampment?
Yeah, exactly. Well,
or bring my own food next time.
Yeah, exactly. The funny thing is, he was actually able to escape with food items. He convinced the father of the group to eat some of his snuff, and when it didn't like the way the snuff tasted, he gave it scalding hot coffee. And and was able to create a distraction because he had his pack with him as well, so he was able to make those comestibles. But It's interesting. I brought Sasquatch into the discussion because of the similarities between that and the fairy food trope, but Sasquatch tend to be the only entities who offer meat, really, generally speaking. You'll run into a couple of encounters here and there where somebody receives an extraterrestrial steak or something, but by and large, a lot of the foods that people receive in all these encounters, from fairies and aliens and Sasquatch, conform loosely to a lacto-vegetarian diet, and they're mostly pretty healthy foods, with the exception of pills, and God knows what they are. Fairies tend to give bread and like a wine or a punch or something. As I mentioned before, aliens tend to give. I mean, the scales are lopsided in favor of liquid by like a 60% margin. It's a huge amount of cases that I studied that involve liquid, which also ties into some ideas that I have as well.
We got to go on break, by the way, guys. Missed
Okay.
about 4 minutes.
Okay.
Tim?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And we will be back. Well, we're back with the real Joshua Cutchin, and this is Tim Beckley on Unraveling the Secrets with Carla Anderson, proprietor of Balance, the only UFO-oriented mothership and hair salon and gallery.
And she's awake.
Maybe you just think it's a hair salon.
Well,
I sometimes I put liquidy stuff down people's throats.
I was just saying, I can remember having a few drinks. I can remember having a few drinks and passing out in the backyard. So right there.
Did it feel like syrup, Tim? Did it feel like syrup?
So I do believe that is the case. And down in Florida, we have the master of all of this who brings us to the airwaves every Saturday night and for eternity, because once we're up on the internet, there's no doing away with us. So you're stuck with us, and some of these shows have been so good, you should have listened to them 2 or 3 times already. And if you haven't, tell your friends, because there's some really good programming here. We don't slouch for 1 minute when it comes to unraveling the secrets.
By the way, you can also check out the podcast on unravelingthesecrets.com. Back to you, Tim.
Indeed. Thank you, Angel, for putting them up there. So Josh, now, so you say there is a difference possibly in the beverages and the food supplied by the fairies and Sasquatch and extraterrestrials. What would you say? Is there one case that stands out as being the strangest case, as if they weren't all strange?
Oh heavens! I'm trying to think of something that would be one of the weirder ones. The Simonton case is awfully strange, but there was another case that I was trying to recall. From this might not be the strangest one. I'm trying to think of all the ones, but another one of my favorite cases that's sort of odd is in 1980 there were supposedly these bright lights that appeared on the farm section of a Cuban prison, and there was like a strange shadowy figure that was seen, and the figure disappeared, and left behind were these gigantic fruits that looked like papayas and oranges and apples, and one of the inmates actually had an infected leg and ate one of the fruits and had it healed, which is just sort of a nice little sort of odd case.
Boy, if you had something like that, you could really advertise it and promote it.
Yeah, for real.
People like all kinds. I mean, over the years I have tried some very strange textured drinks, like spirina. Is that one from, I think, the Philippines, or Bora Bora or something? That is so hard to digest. It must have been implanted here from somewhere else. Any tie-ins with the Roswell or any UFO crashes and liquid being found? Liquid or food or?
Yeah, there is sort of this rabbit hole that I go down, because it was sort of difficult for me because nobody had ever really done this before, to wrap my arms around it. So what I ended up doing is, I've had a lot of people interested in what aliens eat or what Sasquatch eats or what, but that's not really what the book is about. The book is about the exchange, because that to me, the fact that something eats isn't odd. The fact that there is this exchange is really what's odd. So I end up going down this rabbit hole, which I think I sort of did need to address, which was I'm sure you've heard of this idea that David Jacobs put forth of the absorption theory. And there was an article, a Magonia article, back several years ago, that said that, well, this isn't really David Jacobs' theory. There's been plenty of other evidence to suggest this idea that alien beings absorb through their skin. Phil Corso mentioned it, and day after Roswell, John Lear said something similar. If you look through the literature, there's a lot of this. And going all the way back to fairy literature, there's suggestions that fairies absorb their food through their skin as well. So the reason, so that's the Roswell tie-in, because, day after Roswell, they said that the doctors didn't see any means of excreting bodily waste. They just saw a small slit-like mouth. And of course, you look at a lot of abductee stories, and they don't describe genitals or an anus. So you look at that, and the reason that entire subject is brought up in the book is because, well, if these entities do not consume in a traditional fashion, do we have to widen this idea of entity food, of alien food, to incorporate and include people who say that they were smeared with ointments? Villa Boaz, the Mirasol abduction cases, all of the Mario Restier case, all of these cases where people say that they're smeared with some sort of liquid or goo. Is that something that we have to address as well? So that was sort of a roundabout way of saying, yes, there are references to Roswell in there in regard to liquid. But it's another reason why I was sort of always been very hesitant to put an exact number on how many cases, because I'm not sure if those ointment cases, these goo cases, should be included or not.
No, I think so. I mean, I would think that there's a definite place for them in the structure here. Now, how about food and liquid going in the opposite direction? Have aliens ever been presented with candy or sweets or pudding or anything along that line?
Yeah, it's really interesting. A lot of something that's throughout all these cases that you just don't see a lot of are candy and meats, which is interesting to me. You'd think in Western society we would be, if we were making all of this up, we would be saying, oh, they gave me a burger and they gave me they gave me Swedish
M&Ms.
fish. It was awesome. Yeah, M&Ms. But neither
or
of those...
Reese's. Now Reese's Pieces, please go ahead.
There you go.
I know, right? Yeah. But a lot of the things that people say that if you look at the fairy stories from ages ago, people would give, they put out milk for the fairies or bread for the fairies and hope that the fairies would sort of bless their house or bless the things that they were doing the next day.
Instead they burned it down.
Yeah. Nowadays, it's sort of hard to be in a position where you can give an alien food because you're either abducted from your car or from your house late at night. But there was a lady in Minnesota.
They're not raiding the icebox.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, you look at there are several cases. People always refer to the Richard French instance where a man in black tried to drink Jell-O, but there are actually a couple of cases like that. That sort of where people have given men in black Jell-O and they've tried to drink it. But there was a woman in Minnesota.
Well, I used to do that on Saturday afternoon. They're called Jell-O shots.
Exactly. The MIB.
I always knew you were a man in black there, Tim.
Yeah, right.
But there was a lady in Minnesota who answered the door, and there were these little men outside, each like about 26 inches tall, and she invited them in and gave them bread and butter and sausage, and they all loved it, and she also gave them coffee, and they hated the coffee. There's the Hingley case from Birmingham in the UK, where these entities supposedly entered sometime around Christmas one year. They entered her house and paralyzed her, and eventually that wore off, and she had this conversation with them and gave them meat pies as they mince pies.
I've got a story for you. When I was over in England back in the 1980s, I met a lady by the name of Margaret Fry, and she had I don't want to. I think it was her, but she investigated a lot of these different cases. But I believe it was her. She had some pies on the windowsill, and the aliens came and grabbed her freshly baked pies.
Yeah, I've heard that. I think I've heard that case as well. I don't think it made it into the book, but it was definitely Again, a lot of the focus was from the entity to the witness. So there is a chapter of the reverse of that where I talk about it. But yeah, there's English cases. Pies tend to appear every now and then, which is interesting.
Anybody ever get sick?
Yeah, I mean, you look at you look at a lot of well, here's. I have to sort of backpedal that a little bit because I can't guarantee causation. There are a couple of instances where people say they have consumed something and it has immediately made them sick. There are other cases where people are supposedly on board a craft and they've taken something and then when they return they're sick. But the question is that as a direct result of what they've consumed, or is that because of some sort of other effects that they experienced on the craft? But yeah, there are a couple of instances where people were to vomit. There was a case in, I believe, oh geez, I think it was Masquerade of Angels, where Carla Turner talks about a gentleman who took some sort of drink. He took a drink of this stuff and he vomited and he saw his soul exit his body, and it was sort of a strange case. And there are other cases of people who take food from the fairies and have eaten it and they vomit and they see that it's not really food at all. It's actually just worms and grass that were sort of disguised. They were cloaked in glamour to appear appealing when they actually were nothing but detritus. So
now, would you say that any of these is there any change in attitude or in style or as we get 2015 now, is it any different than what would have happened 30, 40 years ago?
It is, in the sense that it mirrors larger trends. I mean, I don't think we really run into a lot of cases that we would straight up consider contactee cases. So in that sense, people aren't getting a lot of fruit. They aren't getting a ton of fruit juice. They're mostly getting, these uncomfortable, forceful experiences of abduction. But whenever you do have someone who says that they encounter a fairy, or someone who says that they encounter an alien being in more of a contactee-like scenario, there's a surprising amount of consistency that I've found in the sort of foods that are offered. To me, it's become actually sort of a predictive thing. There was a great documentary that I was watching. It was a French documentary about anomalous encounters in Iceland, and there was this young girl who said that she had eaten with the fairies, and of course my ears perked up. And she said that she had fallen down after playing among some granite boulders, and this fairy woman came outside and invited her inside the boulder to give her some food. And immediately right then I said, okay. I said, it's going to be a bread and some sort of liquid. And sure enough, the next thing the girl says was, they gave me funny banana juice and bread shaped like a spiral. So, to me that was a nice little confirmation that I had that a lot of the... I don't know what's going on with any of this phenomena. I'm not a true believer in any sense, but I think that there are real clues as to the consistency of these encounters. And that was one of those nice things where I was able to say, the girl didn't come in and wasn't offered water. People hardly ever get water. She wasn't offered soda. She wasn't offered, any number of things. I knew that she was going to be offered something that was going to be fruit juice, and she was offered something that was going to be a bread product, because that's another thing that fairies like to do. So, there is through the ages there's a startling consistency. It's evolved as the phenomena has evolved, but hasn't really changed in terms of what entities offer what sort of food, from what I can tell.
So overall, do you have any conclusions at all that you can? Based on your research?
Well, I was very I was very intent on making sure that I only wrote the last chapter in first person, and that I tried not to go into it with any preconceptions and sort of let the data sort of nudge me in the direction that I wound up in. So the short answer is no. It's that something is going on.
What is a fairy encounter like?
Well, in general,
I felt like I had a fairy experience.
Well, in general, the fairy experience has sort of changed over time. Most of the time,
You
when
want
you
to
had
hear
people,
about my fairy experience?
I do. Sorry, I thought you
And
wanted me to.
I really don't. I have no idea what a fairy experience is, but
So how do you know you had one?
because later on I just said I felt like fairies, and that's all I know. So it just felt like
Interesting.
fairies.
Interesting. Tell me.
It was really nothing except that I was sleeping in my room in Jersey City.
Mm-hmm.
This is years ago.
Okay.
And my I had roommates, and my roommate's daughter was over as well. She was sleeping over too. She was around 10 at the time. But I was sleeping, and I woke up, and it was around 1 o'clock in the morning. But I woke up, and when I opened up my eyes, there were all these sparkling lights around me in the room.
Huh.
Like sparkling orbs.
Mm-hmm.
That's why I said fairies, like Tinkerbell. I saw just all this sparkle in my room, and I just kept trying to shake awake, thinking, okay, I'm just dreaming. But I was just looking, and I was just fascinated at all these sparkles on the wall.
That is really fascinating.
How old were you, Carla?
I don't know, 35, 40.
Oh, 30. Oh, I see. Okay.
Yeah, this is at the loft. This was at the loft.
Because we normally
people said
think
a lot of things went on at the loft. They had a lot of weird feelings in the loft.
Uh-huh.
You know, the one I used to live at for all those years.
Yeah. Well, I know, sure, yeah.
So I was just, sitting up in my bed in fascination, just looking at the sparkles, and then all of a sudden there was a faint knock at the door. And you ever see that Taxi episode where death was at the door? You ever see that the show Taxi where death was at the door with Danny DeVito?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yep, I remember Taxi.
Okay, so there was a faint knock at the door. So I swing my head around, and I'm looking at the door now. I was like, now what the fuck is that? First there's sparkles, now what is that? You know what I mean? Because
I
know
that could be unsettling.
It was probably like around 2 in the morning, but I had been sleeping for a while. So, I was awake, and I just said, now what's that? And when the knock at the door came, the sparkles disappeared. So now I'm looking at the door, and I crept up to the door, and I just swung it open real quick, and it was my roommate's daughter just standing there really little. I said, oh, my God. I said, what are you doing? She's like, oh, I have a stomachache. I'm like, oh, okay, I'll take care of you. But it was just weird.
Well, that started in a way that a lot of fairy encounters were to start, which were people walking through the moor and seeing clusters of light in the distance. So, I don't think anything's out of the question.
Yeah, and just because of the sparkle of it, it just was very... Like
benign,
when you see Tinkerbell arrive, the little light, little sparkle orb. I never told you about this, Tim.
No, I don't believe. No, I don't believe I've heard about that. But Joshua, we're coming to a close here. But one thing we really didn't touch on, of course, angels. Now, angels looked very human to in a lot of instances, and I do believe that they came into people's houses and ate with them, right? And did not really necessarily say that they were angels because they were exceptionally beautiful, as I understand.
Yes, Hebrew 13:2. Remember, you might be, I believe it's Hebrews 13:2. Now someone's going to call me out on that. Entertaining angels, be not forgetful to entertain strangers, for thereby some have entertained angels unawares, I believe is the quote. So,
all this talk of alien encounters here has made me hungry, but we have another guest. And Joshua, I want to thank you for coming on. This is very enlightening, and certainly if any episode has unraveled the secrets, this one would be one of those. And how can the people get your book, and how can they find you online? I found you online. Mm-hmm.
Yes, my website is joshuacutchin.com. That's JOSHUACUTCHIN. No spaces or anything. And the book is available from both Amazon and Barnes & Noble.
And Joshua, I want to thank you once again for enlightening, and I'm going to read the book. The first thing when it comes in the mail, it's A Trojan Feast. And once again, thank you for helping us unravel the secrets, and we will be back momentarily. Oh. Well, I just sent for some food to be delivered later after the show, and if somebody shows up all dressed in black or looking very peaked, maybe we'll have discuss this further on the next program. But we're back with Unraveling the Secrets, and our guest this evening for the remainder of the show is Stephen Miles Lewis, who actually we just call him Smiles.
Yes.
And he certainly is. Smiles. The mild smile, Lewis, who has been investigating anomalous phenomena since growing up for many, many years. He had some ESP and precognitive experiences and some dreams, which bolstered his interest in the paranormal. And after graduating from high school, he joined the local MUFON chapter in Austin, Texas. And he was later to become a MUFON state section director. Is that all you got out of high school, Miles?
Pretty much, yeah. Prepared me for the job pool.
Do you? Okay, you have you have a job in the daytime, but you also run what very intrigues me. You have your own radio station or network podcast, which you've been doing for how many years now?
Since the year 2000, so 15 or so years, yeah.
Well, were there actual podcasts in those days?
Well, but the word didn't exist, so no. And the technology to enable podcasts didn't exist until, 2006 or so, or 5. But, of course, audio was archived on the internet for years, and it took forever to download back in the day. Before the term existed, you posted, you recorded your show and you posted it online the old-fashioned way with, file transfer protocol programs, and got it up there. And so people, were still listening to internet audio and streaming audio before the word podcast existed. But yeah, I started the radio station back in late 2000 as a way of ramping up publicity for the National UFO Conference that I was hosting here in Austin in 2001. And that was actually going to be the third year in a row that the NUFOC, as we called it, was going to be in Texas. 1999's conference was in San Antonio, put on by Dennis Stacy, and featured Whitley Strieber and that rich guy Firmage, and
oh yes.
And then in 2000 it was in Corpus Christi, and that's where the reins were handed to me to organize and host the 2001 September conference in Austin, Texas, and
which unfortunately, due to circumstances beyond any of our control, was canceled at the last minute because it came right on the heels, or was supposed to come on the heels of the World Trade Center disaster.
Yeah, it's kind of weird because we were going to honor Robert Anton Wilson with a Lifetime Achievement Award. He was our stellar guest among so many other wonderful guests that we had scheduled, and he's been described by others as the head of the Illuminati, and of course some believe that it was the Illuminati behind those shenanigans on that day. But not to make light of all of that, it was pretty devastating to witness, as it was for most of us. And on top of that, on a personal level, this kind of life's dream of my first conference to organize. I'd worked on other mini conferences and MUFON conferences locally, but this was the first thing that I'd put.
Had you pre-sold a lot of tickets?
Not particularly, but there was definitely a lot of money invested.
In other words, it wasn't like the big auditorium they had down in Mexico City. You weren't expecting. You had no alien bodies to show, and you did not have a 10,000 seat auditorium. Is that correct?
No, sir, we did not. It was actually it was in the original Alamo Draft House Theater Cinema in downtown Austin, which now is this massive franchise. It's the kind of theater where you can drink a beer and get a meal, and while watching your favorite movies. Only usually it's cult favorites and second run. But we were going to have, it was 3 days and 3 nights of UFO speakers, panel discussions. We were going to have a film fest in the night, as well as live music. We had local bands. Each had their own set of UFO related songs, and it was going to be fantastic.
You are an all around entrepreneur, but hey, no need to miss out, because come June 19th to the 22nd, the public is invited to attend. I would say it's it's not really the 51st meeting, but it's the 51st anniversary of the National UFO Congress, and it's going to be held near in one of the hotels near the airport in Cleveland, Ohio. And I'm taking the train. It's a 15-hour trip, but I'm looking forward to it. I actually haven't been to a UFO conference in about 4 or 5 years now, and these are all my homies. I mean, Smiles, these were the guys that I grew up with, the Cleveland crowd. They were the ones that, along with Jim Mosley, who got this started back in 1964 or whatever, 5 or whatever it was. I did not attend the first meeting, but I was there for the second one, and so I very rarely make a public appearance, but I will be there in full force on June 19th to the 22nd, and please do stop by and say hello. I mean, I think this is going to be pretty much more of an informal group of sessions than what you had planned, obviously. If somebody asks me, I do have some interesting material I'm going to bring along with me. I'm going to probably give a talk, my first one, on synchronicities and coincidences, which I'm very much into. Now, I don't know, I don't know where the Cleveland crowd stands these days. Remember, how old are you, Smiles?
I'm going to be 44 in a couple of weeks.
Well, okay. Well,
next week, actually.
Let's see. You would not remember then the peak of interest in Cleveland. At one point was the hub of UFO activity. Earl Neff was kind of the director of all of this, and there was a weekly radio show called the Ufology Roundtable. And in fact, some of the old programs are archived. And a month or so ago, I was listening to one of the old shows, and Earl Neff is reading the mail, and he says, and this is 1966, that's how I remember this. He said, here's a postcard sent in by Tim Beckley from New Brunswick, New Jersey, from the Interplanetary News Service. And I forget what rather, a boring, childish question that I had asked, because I think that was maybe around the time that Betty and Barney Hill was just, some of the had moved away from the contactee era and had gotten into maybe Snippy the Horse and some of these other things that were going on. But Cleveland was the hub of the UFO activity, as opposed to like the West Coast, which would have been, the pretty much the contactee, and the Cleveland crowd was more rooted, I would say, in science, but even they would have to agree that's not quite the case. I would describe all of us, I guess, as kind of middle of the roaders.
Yeah.
And so this is going to be it's going to be an interesting occasion, and the group, the old group, will be back together again. Alan Greenfield and I think Ed Beeble and Bob Easley, and of course Rick Hilberg. Without Rick, I don't think any of this would be going on. Are you planning to go by any chance?
I had really, really hoped to, but sadly, circumstances are not going to allow that to happen, and I'm kicking myself in the behind, because there are so many of you that I haven't met. I actually did meet you once briefly at Albuquerque MUFON in 1992, but it was just,
oh my goodness,
it was just in passing. It's kind of a humorous anecdote, but but no, there's so many of the founders that I've never had the chance to meet, or I've heard about, read about, and and having gotten to know Mosley a little bit,
yes.
I think the characterization of the crowd as middle of the road is certainly accurate, and that's one of the things that's always appealed to me about that group.
Would you ever consider trying to put on another program like that?
Well, just in general, yeah, sure. I mean, with my local archive, we've done some small events, nothing on the scale. A little gun shy, I'd say, after that terrible tragedy. But definitely want to have continue to have at least small events, but multiple speakers for a day or more is also probably in the cards.
Well, now you probably have, I think, outside of the you have probably the only active library in the United States devoted to UFOs and the paranormal. You recently got the Bob Gerard's collection.
Yeah, a lot of folks aren't familiar with Gerard, but those who've been in the scene for more than a decade or so have to be aware or have come across his Arcturus book service, which was highly influential in that it was.
Okay. Well, before you do that, though, tell us something about the organization and the library, so we have a little bit of background in this.
Back in the early 2000s, I had, we in the wake of September 11th and the canceling of the National UFO Conference, some friends and I started a local publication called Austin Paratimes, and I edited that for about a year. And at some point, I just realized it was really distracting me from another life's goal that I'd had for my life, and that was to found some kind of anomaly archive focused on preserving the research and books that I was accumulating at the time. And so come 2003, I had over 1,000 books, and it seemed a shame to have them unavailable to others. I mean, I lended some of them to friends and family, but so I had come into contact with another nonprofit who has been really influential in the success of the archives and my endeavors, and that's the Institute for Neuroscience and Consciousness Studies. And I'd become a board member with them, and in 2003, I got some of the folks together, and we launched a 501c3 nonprofit and did all the applications and set about our mission and our goals, which are the preservation of UFO and anomalous phenomena research, and to provide both an archive and a lending library for the layperson, somebody who's just interested, as well as seasoned researchers who want to go back through the files of other researchers and accumulated research.
Well, now, do you have an actual building devoted to this, or is it in somebody's garage, or how do you exactly? How many books are stored there, and who are the archives? I mean, who donated their material?
Well, over the years, we've received a number of different donations. That 1,000+ donation of mine initially was also bolstered by another local zine producer. In the 1990s, I had been producing a little magazine called ELF Infested Spaces, Elf Infested Spaces, Journal of Possible Paradigms, which I started after being inspired by another Austin zine producer named Wes Nations, who had published a magazine called Crash Collusion that was about psychedelics.
That one I believe I had a copy or two of that one at one
good
point.
Stuff. Really good stuff. And Wesley inspired me to jump into the self-publishing DIY zine scene, and that's how I met people like Greg Bishop and the folks doing The Excluded Middle, and Adam Gorightly, and Ken Thomas of Steam Shovel Press, and all these different awesome wonderful across the spectrum of UFO, paranormal, parapolitical, conspiracy research communities, and that's how I came into contact with Bob Gerard, who was running this Arcturus book service. But yeah, flash forward to 2003, I'm like, okay, I got to found this nonprofit, and so we did that. We did all the paperwork, and so we started having free lectures to the public, and our first one was Adam Gorightly came and talked about Kerry Thornley and the JFK assassination and the weird, crazy synchronicities that surround that incident and that particular individual, Kerry Thornley, and the connections to Robert Anton Wilson and the rise of the Church of Discordianism, such as it is, kind of a faux religion like the Church of the Subgenius or something.
Yeah, we had Adam on a couple of weeks ago. So how many collections do you have, and how much space does it take up, and how many books and publications are there altogether?
Okay, so we're within the facility, the offices of this organization I mentioned, INAC. So we don't actually have our own facility. We are at the mercy of this other organization, and thank goodness for them, bless them for that help. And we are definitely expanding beyond our capacity at that location. But basically, we're in 3 rooms there, and also some off-site locations, yes, in the home workshop for the overflow. But basically, we have about right now we're right around 3,600 titles in the collection. We're approaching halfway on processing another 1,500 books from the Girard collection, and some of the collections that we've collected include my personal collection, the West Nations collection. When West Nations, who was publishing Crash Collusion, moved away from Austin, he split his collection between me and his editor, who was the author of the book about Jack Parsons, Sex and Rockets, a guy named John Carter, pseudonym. He eventually gave me his collection, all the research he'd done on the contactees and the occult and Crowley and magic and all that stuff. And so the Wesley Nations collection was reunited in the Anomaly Archives, and Dennis Stacy, former writer for Omni and former editor of the MUFON UFO Journal for so many years, and one of the founders and guys behind Anomalist Books that was mentioned in the last hour. He's donated some of his collections, lots of paper files, a lot of the types mail and correspondence that he's received from people over the years. And Mike Hansen, who a lot of people don't know, but if anybody knows the name Alex Jones, you might recall that controversy about him allegedly infiltrating that spooky redwood forest compound known as the Bohemian Grove. Well, the guy that went in there with him was Austinite and activist Mike Hansen, and Mike Hansen donated a bunch of his parapolitical books and materials. And there's been a number of other local folks from Austin and San Antonio. The founder of the San Antonio Parapsychological Association donated some of his materials. Local past life regression therapist has donated some of her materials. We have hundreds and hundreds of periodicals, magazines, and so forth.
Well, I know we have actually spoken in the past. Should I at some point meet my heavenly host, that if you can get my files, which are pretty massive, over there, that you can add them to the collection.
We'll need a whole new wing, and that would be wonderful.
Well, yes, well, maybe somebody will donate the money, but I don't know who that.
That's the hard.
It's nobody that I know personally, but yes, you believe me.
We'll start a Kickstarter for you, Tim.
Yeah.
We'll put a Kickstarter together.
Well, although our mutual friend Skylar did offer to bring a truck,
yes,
to haul the stuff out of here, and I said she was being a little bit premature with that, I think, and I can't imagine her. I mean, she thought it was like something she could do maybe over a weekend. I don't know if she was going to drive the truck. I guess she had one of her friends was going to drive the truck or something. But no, this is a massive undertaking. I mean, it's it would take somebody. Well, first of all, you got to understand my book collection, which has been featured in actually some magazines and all, is a huge bookcase. I would say that there must be maybe 2,000 books on there. However, in the meantime, I built a loft bed around the bookcase. So it's kind of hard. I often, if I have to read up on something, of course, now we do have the internet. So almost everything that's ever been published has been pirated. So, it's usually a pretty simple to find whatever you're looking for. But, I keep going. I've been meaning to scan some of the material that I have, like the personal letters. Now, we used to get a heck of a lot more correspondence in the old days than we do now, but I got some intriguing stuff. I mean, I even got a handwritten 9 or 10 page letter from this fellow. His name was Keel. Now, it wasn't spelled the same as John Keel, but John knew who he was, who had an experience that took place up in one of the lakes in Canada, maybe where he saw the aliens on the rim of the craft. I don't remember the exact details. It's many, many years ago, but it was one of the first USO incidents or sightings. It's fairly well known. It has been written up in the literature, but I do have a lot of personal memorabilia and pieces, including a whole file of correspondence from William C. Lamb. Now, William C. Lamb actually is mentioned in Project Blue Book. back in 1932. He was hunting. He used to get up like really early in the morning, like 6 a.m. to go hunting. I forget exactly what he was hunting, but he saw a craft land and the devil come out, and he had to pray the devil away. And the devil, I guess, took after him and went through the barbed wire fence, and it was scorched and all burned. Anyway, it's in the Project Blue Book files.
How do you know it was the devil though?
Well, he said it was the devil. I guess that's just what he was into. Yeah, I wouldn't. Yeah, that's not my. I wasn't there, but this fellow was like one of these. Really, he also claimed that he had photographs of God's throne in heaven, and he would send photographs of the universe and say
inside of his bathroom.
A circle. A circle where he thought God's throne was, or something. I don't know. Hey, you get over the course of 50 years, you're going to get some very strange, reports.
No kidding.
Very strange mail, but it did taper off. But I've got like a collection of letters and correspondence. Some of it readable and some of it perhaps not so readable. That goes back to when I was 14 years old. I mean, people wrote, and we had correspondence from all over the world. I mean, it was amazing because we were one of the few groups at that time that were doing this on an international basis. It was us and APRO, and most of the other groups were very self-centered as far as the UFO activity went. They just were not interested in anything that took place beyond the shores of the Pacific or the Atlantic. So, okay, well, Miles, so tell us about have you ever had a UFO sighting yourself?
The sightings that I've had are fairly mundane, at least in my estimation. I mean, I've had no sightings of anything that I actually consider a UFO, an unidentified or an IFO in the form of a extraterrestrial craft. But I've seen things over the Sierra Nevadas at 30,000 feet that I strongly suspect was Area 51 test aircraft because of the unique exhaust trails and the lack of running lights and that sort of thing. I've seen some other things that were so minor, but I was able to fairly easily ascertain that it was most likely something mundane. So unfortunately, in all my years of interest in these things and having run a support group for people who'd had close encounters and alien abductions and even stranger weird experiences, never really had anything that, to my mind, fit exactly that belief system's interpretation of those things. I've had, sleep paralysis. I've had, weird visions and dreams and such, but nothing that really struck me as being extraterrestrial. And I've also, experienced a UFO hoax, and that was a fun romp in the wilderness.
Was Jim Moseley behind that?
No, he wasn't. But it was Greg Bishop who did that. And it was one of our first kook outs when all of us zine publishers got together.
Kook, I like that kook outs. We have to have a kook out, Angel.
Yeah,
I'm there. I'm completely there. Yeah, I'll bring the kook.
Exactly.
Sitting around the campfire telling weird stories, because we were all interested in that stuff. And then lo and behold, I look up and there's a green light that suddenly is bolted from behind some trees and suddenly stuck in the air and is moving around erratically in a way that no aircraft could do, and draw my friends' attention to it, and the guffaws and oh my gods started. But within 3 minutes, even though we were aided by a full moon that night that helped us through binoculars pick out what looks like, are those black balloons somewhere above the green light that's bobbing about? And hey, there's a flashlight coming through the underbrush, and that turned out to be Greg. And then we started going, where were you? And he had thrown up some one of those glow sticks tied to a fishing line and some black balloons with helium in them, and tied it to a tree and sent it up, and it was fantastic. So for most of the rest of the night, we're sitting at the campfire, continuing to tell weird stories, and this light is just bobbing around in the air. And he posted a picture of it that he took back when he was blogging on UFO Mystic. And at some point, there was a lull in the night storytelling, and somebody says, "Tell more weird stories," and no more weird stories happened, but the wind picked up and the line finally snapped, and there goes our UFO off into the sky to probably cause UFO reports all over Gila Valley, New Mexico.
Okay, so you've obviously been touched by all these strange incidents and things. What is your take on all of this? Are you a nuts and bolts man? Are you a interdimensional junkie? Or how is this all? How has it all changed over the course of the years, and how has it influenced or impacted your life? And so you got 20 minutes to give me an answer.
With my perspective on this has not changed much since 1995. I really I grew up totally believing the classic myth of crash saucers, pickled aliens, and government cover-ups, and I really don't believe much of that anymore at all. I was my true passion for these things. I was fascinated by science fiction and the idea of extraterrestrials all my life growing up. But in high school, I think between psychedelics, listening to Terence McKenna, and reading Whitley Strieber's early books, and Jacques Vallée particularly, and John Keel, my worldview about these things shifted radically away from the idea of these things as just simply extraterrestrial and to all the other possibilities. And I would say I think there's a plurality of possibilities here. There are several different threads that explain different pieces of the puzzle that are all woven together. But the ideas that I find the most resonance with harken back to the 70s and I guess some of the ecological perspectives that have grown out of that. I really think of this phenomena as something that it's been here as long as we have. All cultures have experienced contact with these others, and so to consider them as being from anywhere else is just kind of pointless because they've always been here with us. Mm-hmm. And to me, that also makes them a part of the planet. And I think one idea that has the deepest resonance for me is kind of this Gaian UFO hypothesis, and that's the idea that there is a planetary consciousness possibly at work here, but that really what we're dealing with perhaps is a mechanism of communication between species and different types of consciousness. And I think that in some ways the easiest way of summing it up is that quintessential scene in the Carl Sagan-inspired movie Contact, where Jodie Foster, experiences this whole long scenario that to outside eyes only happens in a split second, and to everybody else's eyes didn't actually happen because they didn't see what she saw. And that the ball of light phenomena that humans have interacted with throughout history, and that we've ascribed all sorts of mythic and religious connotations to, all those ideas imply that consciousness is non-local, can go outside of physical corporeal forms and move about in kind of a plasma-like way and interact with the environment, and can connect people's virtual reality generating perceptual engines, their minds, and inject information that they wouldn't necessarily be able to ascertain except through some kind of quote unquote extrasensory perception or anomalous cognition. And I think that there's a lot of really good data in the research field of parapsychology to help us understand the UFO phenomena, but because of all the different cliques and perspectives on UFOs that are so rooted in classical, old school physics, that there really hasn't been an accounting of that. But so I think that there very well could be this mechanism that allows us to interact with not just a possible Gaian mind, but the collective unconscious of other species, the insect kingdom itself, the reptile kingdom itself, and that maybe that's where these perceptions of insectoid, hive-minded intelligences or reptoids might come from, that they may not literally be, actual 6-foot-tall mantises interacting with us in what you and I consider the physical realm. On the other hand, none of this precludes the possibility of those things. I just think it's a more interesting explanation, and that's where my heart lies, is with those ideas. On the other hand, so that's what I consider the true UFO phenomena. The TRUFOs is this weird high strangeness phenomena that isn't simply extraterrestrials, being shot out of the sky by radar in the 1940s. And at the same time, though, I think you can't look at this without worrying about and seeing the evidence for human Machiavellian manipulations, stratagems, as Jacques Vallée called them in his 1979 Messengers of Deception book, by the powers that be, other human agencies, whether they be, esoteric, corporate, or governmental or military. I think humans have always tried to manipulate people through their belief systems. And if you don't go into this with that, at least in the back of your mind, you will be led down so many paths of misinformation, disinformation, and manipulation that I think so many people already are entranced by.
Well, if these things are all, like you would think, and I would tend to go along with you, something of a spiritual or mystical nature, why would the government or some secret agency or not so secret agency want to kind of secretly foster the belief that they are extraterrestrial? Why not just let it go the way it is? Mankind has been having religious and spiritual experiences, since time was recorded. Why? I mean, do you give any credence of all that maybe there have been some UFO crashes, or some of these things might be physical hardware? What is your take? This seems to be the question of the day here. What is your take on Roswell, for example?
I grew up totally believing in Roswell. I don't anymore in terms of the classic idea of crash saucers. If I'm going to ascribe any kind of significance to Roswell, I'd go in two different directions. One is the pretty radical direction that people like Walter Bosley have suggested, that's kind of a take on Mac Toney's crypto-terrestrials, this idea that maybe there is this other species here that may or may not be much more advanced than us, but that there could be what I think is also called a breakaway civilization now by certain other researchers. It's become a really popular phrase, but that there could be some other crypto-terrestrials here, hidden civilization, and I think that there's some interesting possibilities there. Carla Turner even suggested that, the abduction researcher that I liked so much, but the other direction I go on Roswell is the idea put forth by the people who contacted Nick Redfern for his book Body Snatchers in the Desert. This idea that maybe what we saw was the result of the melding of Horton Brothers German aviation flying wing research with the horrific continuation of the Unit 731 Japanese Mengele type human experimentation, where they allegedly were using disabled people, body snatched from institutions around the United States and possibly brought over from the experiments going on in Japan after the war, and that they used these human subjects perhaps in the test flights for some of these advanced aviation things, testing radioactive propulsion and whatnot, and that may be what was witnessed, and that's why there's not been a full reveal about that. But do I
makes sense? Makes a lot of sense.
Well, that's kind of my thinking in these days, is that the government would rather have you believe that they were extraterrestrial rather than you realize that we were consorting with Nazis, that we brought over 5,000 Nazi engineers and scientists. Yeah.
And check this out. There's a theory that I've had for a long time also, that part of what happened at Roswell was the result of Nikola Tesla's work. He was working on UFO technology before he passed away, and he happened to have died right after the war in 1945, 2 years before Roswell.
He's a fascinating character, yeah.
So he was working on a flying saucer, ironically enough, and that's what crashed at Roswell. I mean, that to me, it's always been like, why isn't nobody else looking at this?
Well, how do we explain things like Kecksburg, Pennsylvania, and
test flights? A lot of them are test flights that crash. I mean, look, when you create a new technology, especially something that's aerial or even a driving technology or vehicle of some sort, you're going to have crashes. It's just that's the way the technology works. That's how you perfect it. Test flights.
Yeah. My favorite is the one up in Canada, where it landed in the in the water and the bubbles came to the surface, and to me that's one of the better cases.
Is that Shag Harbor?
Shag Harbor, yes.
Yes,
Shag Harbor.
yeah, that's a good case. Yeah.
What happened?
Yeah, and
exactly,
Shag Harbor.
Yeah.
What happened?
Well, I guess it was about maybe just before a nightfall. And there were a couple of teenagers, young people that were driving by, and they saw this thing come over the bay in Shag Harbor, and it crashed into the water. And there was some kind of foam or slime that came up to the surface. And they sent divers down, and apparently there was some object over there, but it either moved or disappeared over a period of several days. It's pretty well documented. In fact, I think it's Don Ledger, he's written a book on the subject, and people have come forth over the years who actually were scuba divers and went down to investigate it. But that seems to have been some sort of physical craft. Yeah, as much as I go along with the paranormal and Gaia theory that you talk about, Smiles, I still can't help but thinking there are a number, maybe of limited cases, where these things do seem to be hardware of some sort, and of course they do go back before World War II and all. I mean, we can't say that everything. Now, apparently, the Nazis had the Vril Society. They had their own psychic group made up of 9 women who were mediums, and they channeled and went into a trance, and they had all these diagrams and work and plans and so forth on these craft. And if you look at some of the drawings that they did, they look remarkably similar to the photographs that George Adamski, took in the 1950s. And also, too, in some of the early UFO cases, the UFO occupants talked with a German accent. And, of course, many of them were very Aryan-looking. The Orthons of that period were tall and blonde and had, blue eyes. I mean, they could have, walked out of a German cult group of some sort.
Well, there was a period of time where I briefly was joking about the possibility that the 3 main types that at the time it seemed like I kept coming across, the 3 main types of entities that seemed to be most commonly reported in the modern UFO era were these diminutive, large-eyed, slant-eyed grays, and the some that looked more Italian or the Men in Black, and with some of them often described with the widow's peak and the black hair, and then the Aryan Space Brothers. And well, what have you just described? But perhaps a futurization of the Axis powers, the Italy, Japan, and the Aryan Space Brothers, but yeah, I don't really put much stock into that. And that's the thing, is for me, with all the different, there's such variability within the UFO literature as to the types of entities described, that it just, I don't think any idea about, I mean, obviously the extraterrestrial hypothesis could account for it in the sense that, okay, the universe is huge, and that shows the possibility for huge variability amongst those interacting with us. Okay, sure. But it just doesn't seem as consistent as Western ufologists have tried to convince us, as far as, they're all these gray aliens. There's definitely been at different points in the modern era different types entity reported in different geographical areas, and it seems to be somehow connected to the culture that the sighting waves are happening within. Which to me implies that that you need to really look at perception and not just take these things on a surface literalist interpretation. I think
so. You can't say then that you were. We can't say then you were fooled for 1 minute by the Roswell alien slides.
Oh Lord, yeah, no. That whole thing. I will say this has been an amazing ride for me. I was following this just kind of tangentially. Again, I'm not a huge fan of Roswell. To me, I don't think the UFO phenomena rides on one smoking gun. And if anything, it rides on the wealth of unsolved cases, the bulk of true UFOs. And to me, it just doesn't seem like so much of the UFO literature. So to me, it's kind of an oddball incident. And talk about oddballs, the people who've made it their life's work have really never impressed me. There's a few that did some really good research, but I've never really focused on that. So over the last couple of years, as news, back as far as 2011, news started leaking out about these alleged slides showing an alien body, and then it getting attached to the various very well-known Roswell researchers. And then when Don Schmidt practically ruined a very scientific UFO conference put on by Leslie Kean at the American University in November of last year by saying, I have smoking gun evidence, that will prove Roswell, was an extraterrestrial incident or whatever. And then suddenly Jaime Maussan is connected to the public unveiling of this, and everybody's just groaning, thinking, what are these people thinking? Great. Okay, it would be wonderful if there was some actual verifiable evidence of extraterrestrial being, but you can't get that from a photo. It's not a body. And so proceeding forward, we got a little bit more information when the main slide promoter, the Slidebox Media guy, Adam Dew, released his teaser trailer for the documentary that he's doing. About.
You say Adam Dew?
And he did
great name.
Very
fitting.
I should have come up with that a couple of weeks ago. Come on.
Yes.
So our guest tonight, Adam Dew.
Yeah, boy.
Yeah,
so when that trailer hit the internet, everybody who was interested in it scoured it for any possible glimpses of the alleged alien slides, and he had blurred out almost every instance except for like one or two instances where somebody was able to get a screen grab and adjust it to make it more visible. And so we started looking at what our first glimpses of this slide. And immediately the first thought is, this just looks like a child mummy in a display case in a museum, even though it's blurry and it's really hard to make out. But there isn't, and maybe actually the blurriness, if anything, enhances the sense of, is there something weird about the head? But Occam's box cutter, it's more likely than not to be something mundane. And the provenance, the chain of custody of these slides has not been established. The whole backstory is full of holes, and really they can't verify anything about the original ownership and whether or not these owners of the slides, the takers of the slides, had high level connections with government and military people that could have gotten them into a base where they saw an alien body. But all that aside, when it finally, we're just telling them, give us a better version, and they're like, no, just wait. We're doing our due diligence. We're, getting all these experts to analyze the slides, and there's this placard. There's this little image in the slide that if we could only read that might tell us something important about the nature of this body. And so the Cinco de Mayo Be Witness event unfolds, and in Mexico City on a Tuesday, and this informal group of skeptics had invited me to participate, and so I got to watch how over the months leading up to this, they had been trying to, from that really blurry slide, figure out what mummy it was. And I was sure that any day they were going to figure out exactly which mummy it was, because the research they were doing was so good. And then we all kind of watched the Cinco de Mayo event, the streaming event. One or two people had paid, and so we were like, text chatting to each other, and they were doing screen grabs and telling us what's being discussed now. And that thing went on for over 5 hours, and it wasn't until the very end that they finally got around to showing the damn slides. And then when they did, it was like, okay, great, it's clear, it's clearly a child mummy in a glass case. And then we started scrutinizing the slide, and some of the best image analysis folks in our group, and this group is from all walks of life around the world. Several folks in Spain and France and the United States and Sweden and others. A number of different people who are somewhat known in the UFO field for their skeptical approaches to these kinds of cases, and they applied that same kind of determination to figure out the nature of these images. And it is quickly apparent that, again, this is clearly a museum type display. And
I got a question. Are the people that put this hoax forward, either are they just plain stupid, or do you think that this is something they did on purpose to try to gain money out of it? Because it's clearly, like you said, a mummified child. I mean, there's no way around it. It is what it is, and this thing was promoted like it was authentic, like you said. And I mean, are they just flat out stupid, these people, or is this just them trying to pull one over everybody?
I think it's a combination of aspiration on the part of Adam Dew. I mean, if you know, Adam Dew is just a guy who basically makes sport highlight reels for high school.
He should really stick to that. He really should.
Yeah, who want to go on. He makes these sport highlight reels, and I can just see that he came into contact with his business, his friends and business partners are the ones who found the slides, and they claim that when they saw the slides, the first thing they thought was Roswell alien, and so they.
Oh, of course.
And
so stupid.
And maybe they saw their meal ticket and their train to some greener.
Yeah, but 2 slides ain't going to make you a lot of money. I mean, at least Ray Santilli had a movie. A home.
Right. He had a video. He had it on Fox. It was the works, man.
He was in the profession. This guy obviously doesn't have that much knowledge, and there's nothing you can do with 2 slides. In fact, when I was editing UFO magazine for 11 years, every once in a while somebody would call or email me and say, "I've got sensational UFO photos. How much are they worth?" And I said, "I give you $20 a photo." and I was probably the only paying outlet for any of this. You could get Billy Meyer for nothing, and he's got the beam ship. So you're going to send me 5 photos of lights in the sky with nothing in the background even to gauge it against.
Yeah, well,
worth $20.
I would just say, if anybody is really interested in this, they should go to the website of the Roswell Slides Research Group. That's roswellslides.com, and that's where we as the group, and I really didn't do much of anything other than provide another set of eyes and a sounding board and try to do a little bit of research to help along the way. But there's about a dozen guys from, like I said, around the world, and you can find at roswellslides.com the explanation for how we solved this mystery that these guys couldn't do in 3 years. We did it in a day or less. And it was this guy that goes by the name of Nab Lator was the first one in our group to really decipher the beginnings of the slide, the placard that says mummified body of 2-year-old boy, and that it was on loan from San Francisco, California, and the whole backstory has pretty much been established now about where this body came from. But the people promoting it are digging in, and even after the apology of Don Schmidt, he has now retracted that and is back on the gravy train of UFO lecture tours, and he and Tom Carey and
but let's be serious about this though. There is no gravy train. What gravy train? Where do I get on the gravy train? I mean, I've been publishing books for 50 years. There is no gravy train. Have you found the gravy train?
No, I haven't. But okay, somebody.
Hey, our first guest had the gravy train. The alien gravy train.
He got something in the beginning. Yeah.
A lot of changed hands here. That's all I'm saying is, Adam Dew got paid by Jaime Maussan, and Jaime, had 6,500 to 7,000 people in that auditorium paying anywhere from $20 to $80 a pop.
That's the gravy train right there.
Yeah, but I wonder how much that auditorium cost, because if you want to go rent Madison Square Garden, it's about $45,000.
Right. And but it just the gravy train is really what I'm referring to is the circus tent of ufology.
Yes, it's the circus tent. Yeah, absolutely. And once in a while I've put on a clown costume, and I suppose we could all be have said that we've been involved in that to some degree, because the field and the subject matter lends itself to it.
But a Native American child's desiccated form has been continued to be desecrated after being dug up, and now it's been part of this hoax. And it's I can't say for sure if this was an actual hoax on the part of anybody, or if they just thought everybody was this stupid.
Well, or they had no background in archaeology or just common sense.
Common sense. Yeah, a lot of people in the UFO field do lack common sense. Certainly Very not true. Any of us gathered around these microphones this evening here. So I guess you would say, Smiles, that there's
one of the guys anyway.
A hell and there's no chance of disclosure. We have to tell Stephen Greer at some point. Well, he had his own alien body too,
yes,
but there's no disclosure.
I will. I don't want to end up with this.
It's a tough one.
I was going to say I would give the one bit of credit I would give to Greer was in the wake of 9/11, or actually may have been right before, he issued a white paper where he said, we're all asking for the government to tell us the truth, but we shouldn't necessarily believe it when they give it to us. And I think at least there, I that's my general suggestion of it's a healthy skepticism of everything, including your authority figures. And
here's the question, though. I mean, even if the government comes out tomorrow and says, "All right, this is the truth," can we believe it anyway? Regardless, I mean,
but not only that, it's the truth as maybe one small fraction of the military or the government.
Right.
It's the same
and
thing.
how many times have they changed the story on Roswell already?
Yeah, I'm sure just like in the private sector here, we know for a fact that in the military and in the government, everybody is split on this. Some people think it's demons. Some people think it's temperature inversions, and some people think it's
swamp
aliens.
Gas.
Yes. If you go and you check all the classified documents that were released under the Freedom of Information Act, or maybe even the early days, some of the stuff that was released, everybody had a different point of view. And so what does Obama do? He asked Shirley MacLaine, and he's got.
I'll tell you what, Tim. There hasn't been a day that I have not woken up and said to myself, "What does Shirley MacLaine think about this?"
Well, my new book, Shirley MacLaine Meets the Palladians. If you get that on Amazon.com, you will find the answer.
I will read that.
You will indeed. Oh, okay. Anyway, we are winding down, and Smiles, I want to thank you. You're a very good guest, and I've enjoyed the conversation. And we'll have to continue this at some point. What are you doing now? Where do people find out about your work? And are you sure we're not going to see you in Cleveland, June 19th to the 22nd?
Well, you never know. I might catch a lift on a flying saucer. Folks can find out more about me at smileslewis.com, and the nonprofit lending library is anomalyarchives.org. and they can find links to all my projects through there.
And let me tell you, when you get my collection, it's loaded with dust. Get a big broom and a dustpan because you're going to need it, because I'm allergic to this stuff already. I mean, books and files are big dust collectors, but the information, valuable. Anyway, this is Tim Beckley, and I want to thank our guests for being on, and Angel, our producer and engineer down in Florida. And over there in Jersey City, our sleepyhead, Carla Anderson, who runs Balance. And remember, next week, the same time, and all our shows are archived on unravelingthesecrets.com and on YouTube. And I do believe when I'm in Cleveland for the National UFO Conference, if everything is working correctly, I will either record some stuff or we will do a live Skype broadcast from there. So it may be hectic and all, but heck, the shows are hectic as they are. So again, thanks for tuning in, and we'll talk to you very soon. And do send me an email with your thoughts and your suggestions.